Well, getting a flat tire is never fun. How's that for being obvious? I remember one time during college when a buddy and I went up to the Kalamazoo Ice Arena for a rock concert. And it was late when it was over, and we were driving back to South Bend along a highway surrounded by farms. And I know most of us have been on that road between South Bend and Kalamazoo, right? You know how remote it is. I see some people nodding their heads. So we were driving along in this more remote part of that highway when one of the front tires blew out. And so we were college students in the early 90s, so obviously the car was borrowed, right? It was a buddy of ours. And the buddy I was with was a former high school linebacker, and so we felt pretty confident. We'll get to the side of the road, we'll change the tire. Both of us had experience in that, and we'd be on our way. So we got up, popped the trunk, got the spare out, got the jack out, first part. Where's the other part? We tore that trunk apart. We didn't have a jack. We didn't have all the parts for it. And our buddy is later on he told me, oh yeah, I forgot to tell you, I don't know where that other piece went. So here we are in the middle of nowhere with a flat tire and no jack. And it's just the two of us. And so this is, again, the early 90s. You don't have a smartphone, just go boop, 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 and, call somebody, right? You had to go to a payphone. Well, there wasn't even, the only thing I saw off in the distance was like a light. And probably on one of the farms, I said, I'll probably be shot before I even reach whoever's light that is. So we were thinking about scratching our heads kind of what to do. And then pretty soon this old pickup pulls in behind us. And it has about 5 or 6 guys about our age, kind of rough looking, and they get out and they say, hey, you need some help? And I said, oh yeah, we're coming from the concert in Kalamazoo. I was like, oh yeah, we were there too, man, it was so good. And you guys need some help? Yeah, do you have a jack? Yeah, so let me look. They tear their truck apart. There's no jack. So what do we do? Well, the guys got around the front of the car and they just lifted it up. And my buddy spun off the lug nuts, put the tire on, got them back on, and then we were on our way. And as difficult, and we were very grateful for their help, and as difficult as that situation was, there was one thing that everybody knew. You don't drive on a flat tire. And no matter how, we might have spent the night in the car until morning, but you don't drive on a flat tire. Why? You'll destroy the tire. You'll destroy your rims. You'll probably break the mechanical functioning of your steering, all sorts of things. Everybody knows you don't drive on a flat tire. It doesn't work. If we get a flat tire, it has to be fixed, and it can be fixed. Well, what about our hearts? What about the wounds in our hearts? Unlike fixing a flat tire, so many of us live lives with a flat tire and think, this is as good as it gets. How many of us have been driving on a flat tire of discouragement, of feeling abandoned, of a broken and wounded heart? And the longer we try to drive on this flat tire, the more it becomes part of who we are, our identity. This is me. This is my life. So many of us doubt the power and the desire of the Lord to heal us. And this unexpressed grief in our hearts traps us in our own prison. We need to be set free. The good news of the gospel is in the words of St. John in the first chapter of his gospel. What came to be through him was life, and this life was the light of the human race. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. God desires us. He desires all of us, all of our hearts, all of our lives, all of our history, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Where we experience darkness, he desires light. Where we experience imprisonment, he desires freedom. He desires us to be whole. And that's one of the definitions of Catholic. Usually we say, well, what does Catholic mean? We say, yeah, Catholic means universal. But universal means according to the totality, or in keeping with the whole. So to be Catholic then means to seek wholeness, to live in wholeness, not just in the wholeness of the faith, but wholeness of life, of being and feeling whole. Today, Bartimaeus has a life-changing encounter with Jesus Christ. We don't know much about him except that he's blind, that he begs for a living, and that his dad's name is Timaeus. But as this encounter unfolds, we find out more about Bartimaeus. He's blind, but he doesn't want to be blind. Who knows how long he's been blind? How difficult his life has been because of it. How long he's been driving around with a flat tire. His blindness is part of the brokenness and woundedness that sin has brought into the human condition. You know, in the fall, the human race experienced 5 broken communions, 5 fractures between us and God, a spiritual brokenness, between us and each other, a social brokenness, within us, between our mind and heart, a psychological brokenness, between our body and our soul, physical brokenness, and between us and nature, an ecological brokenness. We've all been affected by this, by the fall and the brokenness and woundedness that it brought. The Lord created eyes to see, and in Bartimaeus' case, those eyes don't work right. God came to heal these fractures and to restore Catholic wholeness. And what is extraordinary about Bartimaeus is that he thinks Jesus can do something about it, about his own specific brokenness, blindness. And so he cries out, "Son of David, have pity on me." And this cry expresses Bartimaeus' faith. Son of David is a messianic title. And Bartimaeus cries out in his brokenness, "Son of David, have pity on me." And in this we also discover that Bartimaeus has great courage. He won't stop crying out, even though those around him, who by the way can see, are telling him to knock it off. Bartimaeus keeps going. And then we see what Jesus' response to this man's woundedness, his faith and his courage. What does Jesus do? He stops. He sees. He calls. The people have a change of heart and actually begin to help Bartimaeus get to Jesus. And Bartimaeus throws aside his cloak, which shows his willingness to kind of go all in, because that cloak is probably all he has as a beggar. He springs up and is eager to encounter Jesus. And St. Mark doesn't include an important detail, but we can presume it. What was it like for Bartimaeus to be before the Lord and to have the Lord gaze upon him? You know, even with our eyes closed, we can sometimes feel when someone's looking at us. I wonder what it was like for Bartimaeus to feel the gaze of Jesus. And the Lord asks, "What do you want me to do for you?" Doesn't that sound like a strange question for the Son of David, right? Isn't it obvious? But it's important because it gives Bartimaeus the opportunity to ask, to exercise his freedom, to participate interiorly with what Jesus wants to do with him. And so he says, "I want to see." So honest, so sincere. Then Jesus gives him his sight. And I wonder what it was like for Bartimaeus when he could see, and the first thing he saw was Jesus' eyes gazing upon him. Jesus gave him the ability to see. Our Lord wanted him to see. And Bartimaeus responds to this loving gift by following Jesus along the way. He becomes his disciple. He's radically transformed in body and soul from this simple encounter with Jesus. What seems impossible was now accomplished, and now Bartimaeus desires to give himself completely to God. What about us? Can we put ourselves in Bartimaeus' place? Where do we feel blind? Where are we hurting? Where in our life is that flat tire that we keep trying to drive on? Have we fallen into a discouragement and accepted that this is just the way it is? This is as good as it gets for me. I invite you to discover that without self-censoring. Don't judge. Shame shuts down the healing process. You notice Jesus never shames the sinner. No one is shamed into conversion. But just observe, notice, show yourself a little kindness. Have a little curiosity. Let whatever is there rise to the surface. Somewhere deep inside each one of us is a burning desire to finally become the person God created us to be. We yearn to be fully alive and give ourselves as a gift wholeheartedly back to God. And yet, despite these stirrings, many of us hesitate and resist, that we fear the very thing we desire. Bartimaeus may have experienced this, but the proximity of Jesus helped him to rise up and to call out to him. You know, this kind of radical transformation is not just a nice story in the Bible. Jesus offers the same kind of healing for each one of us today, now. Jesus is here, and he desires to encounter each of us in our pain and woundedness. You know, we're embarking on a journey together, a journey of healing as a parish, with Dr. Bob Schutz's wonderful book, Be Healed. And after Mass, there's the opportunity to get yourself a copy if you don't have one already. We begin by simply taking an honest look inside yourself. Do you want more? Do you long to be more fully alive, but find yourself restricted by fear, by shame, by disillusionment? Have you tried to fill empty spaces in your heart with things and substances and unholy relationships or activities that never really satisfy? Jesus sees. He stops. He calls. Call him. The healing process begins by responding to Jesus' personal call and the church's encouragement. Take courage, get up. Jesus is calling you. And let Jesus gaze on you. Pope Benedict XVI wrote in his encyclical on hope, he says, Jesus' gaze, the touch of his heart, heals us, enabling us to become truly ourselves and thus totally of God. His gaze heals us. Jesus is calling you. So let his gaze penetrate. He loves you. He longs for you. He longs for your wholeness. And every healing begins with the encounter with Jesus. Mother Teresa once wrote to her missionary charity family, so this is writing to her sisters, to those involved in working with the poorest of the poor. These are practicing Catholics, right? These are people involved in the mission of the church. And she said in a letter once, I worry some of you still have not really met Jesus, one-to-one, you and Jesus alone. He loves you, but even more, he longs for you. Jesus wants to meet us one-on-one. And wherever we are in this journey, it's essential that we encounter him, to let him look upon you, gaze upon you, ask you, what do you want me to do for you? And maybe we don't know, and that's okay. Our response can be, Lord, I don't really know. And he responds, just tell me where you hurt. Let's start there. So this week, let's ponder this encounter of Bartimaeus and Jesus, to place ourselves there in the place of Bartimaeus. Just notice what happens. What stirs your heart? Where does it hurt? And no self-censoring, no self-judgment, just growing vulnerability with Jesus and his gaze upon you. Let him go to work on that flat tire. He is God, and he longs to save and to heal us. He's calling.